Today we are going to talk about Floret Zinnias, specifically my experience with growing them this season, whether or not they were worth growing, the hype, the money behind them. We're going to talk about that, but I'm also going to talk about some of the struggles that I've heard from other people in terms of growing these zinnias. We're going to sprinkle a little bit of science behind them. I have some hypotheses, so we're going to go through that in a bit of detail. But for those of you who are new to my channel, my name is Jessie. I live in Zone 7A in New Jersey. I'm in my third year of flower farming. Now, one of the things that I've learned about myself this season is that I really love trying new things, experimenting, and the Floret Zinnias fit very, very well into this category. So a couple of months ago when I started those zinnias from seed, I had done an experiment and I have a video showing that. And basically this experiment was soaking half of the seeds in a fish fertilizer, so Neptune's Harvest in this case, and then the other half not doing anything with them. I wanted to see if it would impact germination rates. And the answer was there was no impact on germination rates. If anything, the germination rate was really, really fantastic. It was like nearly 100% for all three varieties that I started, which were Alpenglow, Golden Hour, and Unicorn. Now, when I transplanted these seedlings into the ground, I was very surprised at what happened afterwards because there was a clear difference between the test and the control group. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in detail. So just to give you guys an idea of what we're going to cover today, we're going to cover about just, why people might have had poor germination, why I had pretty good germination, poor growth, specifically why some people are seeing singles versus doubles. I would say I'm seeing probably about 60% doubles versus the amount of singles. I'm seeing a little bit more singles this week, but I cut so many doubles last week, sold them to florists who love them. They were also really, really big. So we're going to talk about what might have impacted that. And then next, or last but not least, we're going to talk a little bit more about just like species and stability of new cultivars that might also contribute to all of this. Let's start first with just the health of these plants, looking at the control and experiment group. So we are about 2 months into these being in the ground. Just for reference, these were soil blocked. They stayed in the soil blocks for literally like 5 days. As soon as they showed a set of true leaves, I put them right into the ground. Typically, zinnias do better when they are direct sowed versus transplanted, but I always find better germination when I don't direct sow, especially this time of year in July when it's like really, really hot. And with how expensive these seeds are, I wanted to make sure that I controlled as much as possible during germination phase. So you can see these plants are putting on really, really good growth. There's really, really tall stems. We've got multiple side shoots. And this is a section that I've already cut off of and had sellable stems, like premium double big sellable stems. This is the test group. This is the group that was soaked in that fish fertilizer. Now, if we come to the control group is over here, and it's kind of hard to tell, but they are starting to finally bush out a little bit, but definitely nowhere near as robust and bushy as the test side. And what I'm finding is that the initial stems, I'm getting a singular stem, and basically I would have to pinch this in order for it to stimulate that bushy growth on the test side, versus on test side, I never had to pinch and I was already getting side shoots. One of the other things I look for in zinnias is disease, because zinnias are very prone to disease and powdery mildew. So there's signs of powdery mildew over here that just started, but for the most part, this is pretty good that I'm 2 months in and there's very little powdery mildew over here. So again, this is the control group, which you can see there's spot, and this is the beginning of the end essentially, right? If we come over here to the test group, you can see that there really isn't that much sign of disease. Like, yes, there's some spotting happening, but nowhere near the amount that you're seeing on the control group. So this is Golden Hour that I'm showing over here. Let's actually look at Alpenglow and see if there's any of the same characteristics. So this is actually the control group over here, and I have the test group over here. If I were to zoom out a little bit more, you can see that the productivity of the test group is definitely way higher, just more flowers as a whole, more bushy growth. versus this. I mean, it's not bad, but you know, there's definitely a difference that you can see. I would say from a disease perspective, you know, you can see spotting down here, some very yellowing, browning of leaves. You do also see it over here to a greater extent in the test group versus in golden hour. But again, like I have a lot of sellable, cuttable, tall stems. And I think that's the other main difference, is that these stems are just like shooting straight up and giving me really fantastic stem length without needing to sacrifice a side bud. So again, test over here, control, control, test. One other important thing to talk about is actually days to maturity and how I was able to accelerate the days to maturity through that test group. So the seed that was soaked in the fertilizer actually gave me close to like almost 2 weeks. I would say it was about 12 days earlier days to maturity for cuttable stems than the control group. That is pretty huge. I mean, that's like close to half a month, right? So I'm at the point now where I'm just gonna soak everything in fertilizer or that like fish fertilizer mix before I sow them, because I am seeing increased vigor, increased health, increased productivity, and last but not least, faster days to maturity. So this is the only plant variety that I've done it on. I'm curious to see how it works for other flower types. But when I looked into this, there's a lot of scientific research that shows the merits of soaking your seed in a fertilizer or compost to really improve the health and productivity of your plants. So now we get into unicorn mix. And this is where this experiment kind of goes a little bit off the rails, because there's no difference really between the control and the test group. So the test group is over here, the control group is over here. Now the flowers actually look fantastic. The issue is that both groups are riddled with powdery mildew, and I don't love cutting stems with powdery mildew just because like some people are a little bit more sensitive. It can get into your lungs, that kind of stuff. So at this point, I probably won't save seed from this or grow from it, because this kind of indicates to me that this is a variety that is just prone to powdery mildew. And you know, you've got other varieties out there that are a little bit more prone to this disease too, such as like the Queen series that I've learned. So now that we've done a quick recap of the control and test group and really just showing how good, healthy Floret Zinnias could look like, let's actually talk a little bit about germination. From what I understand, a lot of people who had spotty germination tried to direct sow their seeds. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, but I think that if you want better germination, you really should be trying to sow them directly into like a tray or try to soil block them, because you just have a lot more control over the conditions. So I'm curious to hear if any of you guys try to soil block or start them in trays and didn't get good germination, especially for the 3 varieties that I talked about. I've heard from a few people that they didn't have poor germination with the zinnias, but rather it might have been other things like celosia that they had poor germination for. And I did grow some Floret celosias. I try to direct seed them, and you know, it's not just the Floret celosia for me. For whatever reason, whenever I try to direct seed any celosia, it doesn't come up, but when it self reseeds, it reseeds like crazy. So I don't know what's happening over there, but lesson learned for me: in the future, I would actually start the celosia in soil blocks too. Now let's start talking a little bit more about why some people might be seeing more singles versus doubles. So this is where weather, climate, stress actually plays a huge role. And really what I'm trying to say here is that the quality of your zinnias is very likely correlated with how healthy they are and how you are growing them. So for example, we know that when zinnias are stressed out, if they are a double or a cupcake type of zinnia, they will actually revert back to being singles, and it's really hard to reverse that once they have been stressed. So that was actually something I read from Kokoro Garden. I didn't actually see any type of scientific research on this, but it seems to be anecdotal type of experience from many farmers that the more stressed out your zinnias are, the more likely you're going to get singles from them. And this is also variety dependent. So if we think about different types of cultivars of zinnias, Oklahoma, for example, is usually mostly double. When you get into the b.a.r.e giants, they're big, but it's inconsistent between whether or not they are double or they are single. I'm thinking that the Floret Zinnias or the Floret Originals are still not stable enough for them to be fully double. I don't know if they can ever be fully double. When you look at the Queen series, there's times where you also get some singles versus doubles, right? So I think it's to be expected that you're not going to get 100% double, but the question becomes, if you really optimize the plant's health, does that increase the amount of doubles that you will see in your blooms? The other point about weather is that zinnias tend to do a lot better when it is not super, super hot and like we're talking about like blazing heat with little rain. They tend to do better this time of year. So right now we are like in the beginning of fall. The days are still a little bit warm. It's 70 degrees, sometimes it hits the 80s, but at night the temperature has definitely dropped. It's dropped to basically around 60s, sometimes even high 50s. Now we have blips here and there, but the point is that we get relief at night and it's not like 80 degrees at night. That makes a really, really big difference, especially when it comes to zinnias. So I've also read online that there are people who regionally will see more doubles if they live in a climate that is reflective of my current climate versus if they lived in a place that was just like hot all year around and really difficult to get down to these fall temperatures for a significant period of time. It's worth noting that I planted these zinnias out when it was at its hottest, right? Like July is one of the worst months for us, but they were really healthy when they went out, and I made sure that these were watered as seedlings. They never went dry. Now, once they got established, I actually stopped watering them. We do have clay soil, so that helps in that regard. But I think that weather actually plays a really big difference. Now, for me, I actually personally do not start zinnias until after July 4th. That is for a couple of reasons. One is because I've noticed that during the month of July, my powdery mildew happens to be really, really bad. So I try to decrease the probability of that happening. Of course, as you've seen over there with the unicorn mix, it still happened, and I'm still expecting the powdery mildew to eventually overtake these stems, but hopefully I will have enough that I've cut off of to make it worth it. The second thing is that we get a lot of Japanese beetles in July going into August. So my goal is to avoid that pest on the zinnias, because once they get onto your zinnias, like they just eat them. So if they're not flowering then it's less likely that they're going to eat the zinnias, because they don't love the leaves. I mean, like they might chomp on the leaves here and there, but they're really there for the flowers. So by starting them after July 4th, I get to hit better weather and just a higher rate of success in terms of growing healthier zinnias. So the main question becomes, would I pay $20 again for a packet of seed? And the answer is yes, I would. I mean, the goal would be to save my own seed so that I can grow these again next year. And I'm showing you this again because I'm showing you just what this looks like in terms of singles versus doubles. It is really important to give it time to layer up. So in this case, this is going to have a couple of more layers. I'm trying to find you some good ones over here, but you can see like there's definitely some singles, but they're still very pretty in their own right. And this one is a better one where there's more layers of doubles. This one has more layers too. And just to give you guys perspective, this is my palm. So it's actually a pretty big head. I'll show you on the screen what some of my other ones look like when I sold them to florists. So this is just golden hour, and I do expect to cut these for my co-op next Wednesday. This is Alpenglow. So Golden Hour has more of like an orangey creamsicle type of tint. Alpenglow is more blush and just lighter tones. So this is a really big head. It's got really, really big petals. I've noticed with Alpenglow, some of these just have like really thick, like beautiful petal structure and look. Like there's definitely layers over here. I feel like that there is definitely a higher percentage of doubles than I'm seeing on the Alpenglow. So look at this over here. I mean, the color is just phenomenal, especially for wedding work. And this is the control group. This isn't even test group. This is the test group over here. So you can see definitely multi-layer. And again, you do need to let these go a little bit longer to get multiple layers. Don't cut too prematurely. This is definitely a variety that beyond the wiggle test, you want to make sure you're giving it a little bit of time to really, really mature and get those petals. I do also want to show you some zinnias from the parent lineage of all of the Floret Originals, and that is from Dawn Creek. So these seeds are not from Dawn Creek, but they're sold from Flower People, and I believe that she had bought Dawn Creek seeds and basically bred them on her own, but they have that Dawn Creek lineage. So for those of you who don't know, Erin first got her seeds from Corey at Dawn Creek and kind of just like used that as a basis to continue breeding and teasing out the colors. So I have been very, very impressed with these zinnias too. High percentage of doubles, and not just doubles, we're talking like ombre, tons of layers type of zinnias, really, really strong. I had direct sown in this patch before realizing that it was self-sowed with zinnia or with celosia seeds from last year. So it's kind of been like a celosia zinnia patch. But the one nice thing about it is that the zinnias have really stretched up to like get that sunlight. And as a result, I have really long stems. I mean, I have stems that are probably like 2.5, 3 feet tall, which is pretty cool. But let me show you what these zinnias look like. So this is more like an apricot-y orange color. It kind of reminds me of Alpenglow. This is a pollinator heaven right now, by the way. But I want to show you over here. See, like I've been trying to save some seed, so this is perfect. I need to actually take this off and save seed. I'm going to put a photo because this plant has clearly died, but you can actually see the amount of ruffled layers that this plant or that this head had, and it was so beautiful. It was this like great ombre color. We've got more coming over here, and these were direct sown earlier than any other zinnia, and I've been impressed at how long they've held up in terms of being powdery mildew free. So they are also starting to show signs of powdery mildew, but for the most part, like I have been able to cut from this a little bit, but my main intention was to actually save some of this from seed because I felt like that this was a really, really strong zinnia, and it just naturally produced these really, really big heads for me that are great to use as focals. I would love to hear if you've grown the Floret Zinnia series. What are your thoughts? I had a Facebook poll that I put up, and about, I would say 60% of people didn't grow the Floret Originals, but were interested in it. And then about 40% grew them. And of that 40%, it was a little bit split in terms of who had a challenging time and who didn't have a challenging time. So I took some of the comments from that post and try to address some of the troubles that people had, but I'm sure there's more out there. So I think it'd benefit from everyone in comments if we could write a little bit just about our experience, our growing conditions, and where we think we could have possibly went wrong, especially based off of what I just talked about. Now, growing things well for 1 year is certainly not a trend. This could certainly be a fluke. So the goal would be to save these seeds and try to grow them again next year and see if I can still succeed. And basically, I'm going to soak them in the fertilizer and hope that they are all as vigorous as the test group. So unfortunately, if you didn't buy the seed, they're not selling it this year, or yeah, they're not selling it for the 2025 season. I did hear recently that they've made their seed now available in Australia as well as Europe. So if you're in those countries, you might want to see if you can get a hold on these seeds. I think that they've been so much fun. I'm selling each stem at around $1.25 to florists, and the florists love them because they are just in these brilliant colors that you aren't going to be able to find in other types of zinnias. So I think that the work is pretty important, and I'm just really glad that now I have this stock to be able to save seed from and continuously grow out and hopefully get colors that I really want and need for my florists. So hopefully this video was helpful for you, and I'll see you in the next video.